Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today is September 1st, and it's about 1:02. We apologize for the delay on our start. We did have a few issues with people joining, so we had to send out a new link. I do apologize for this delay. Welcome to our Azure Site Recovery webinar, Recovery, Backup, and Business Continuity. We do have a fantastic presenter, Aidan Irmi. And our housekeeping list, the webinar is being recorded, so you will get this link sent out after the webinar. Also, the recording that is being taken will be available on the website. Q&A will take place at the end of the webinar. However, you can feel free to place any of your questions in the chat box throughout the entire webinar, and if it is appropriate for us to answer at that time, we will do so. Thank you so much, and again, I apologize for the delay. Aidan, go ahead.
Thanks, Lindsay. So, hello, everyone. So let's start our conversation today. First of all, identifying some of the availability challenges we have in our modern data centers today. So a lot of the time, maybe we have some multiple DR and backup solutions that aren't really integrated together or interconnected well, and we want to consolidate these down to one solution to make that easier to manage. Of course, in our environments, they're complex. They're not simple. We're not just running a Windows environment. We're not just necessarily using a Hyper-V solution, but we have a mix between Windows and Linux, Hyper-V, VMware, physical systems. It's not just a Microsoft world, obviously. But our business and our business critical apps can be complicated. Maybe we want to use part of the cloud and do some migrations there, but it can be complicated because of all the different pieces that our applications have interdependencies on. So migrating that can be a challenge. But we know that there's some services that we want to take use of in the cloud, but we can't do that until we can move stuff into that workspace and be able to leverage some of that. So how do we kind of overcome these types of challenges? Well, in a disaster recovery specific scenario, we have other unique things to take into effect. So not only if we need multiple solutions to protect our environment, perhaps our current solutions does not support all of our business critical, mission critical systems. So there's a gap there, and that's a bit of a challenge and an area we need to address. If we need to implement, say, a secondary data center, well, that can be a very costly and complicated process to do and to manage and maintain that ongoing. And if we want our DR scenario to be able to be tested, maybe we have like a runbook or a disaster recovery playbook that we want to go through and test periodically, like every quarter, every 6 months, every year, something to that effect. Getting a little bit of an echo. Then that can be difficult too, because there can potentially be an effect to our live production environment, which is not a good thing. And then finally, we sometimes have a risk around data loss and errors and corruption when failing over to a secondary site. Maybe there's issues with latency or snapshots aren't consistent across multiple N-tier systems, and that can be a specific challenge that adds stress in an actual disaster recovery scenario. It's interesting that the main cause of IT quote-unquote disasters are mostly operational type failures, not actual natural disasters that we're used to, like flooding and earthquakes and things of that nature. Things like power failures in the data center, or maybe there's some hardware issues that kind of cascade and cause other systems to fail. Issues on the network obviously are very impactful because everything is tied together through that. So there's many different scenarios that we can classify as an IT disaster, but most of them are in that operational kind of space. So what can we do to kind of mitigate around that, prepare for that, and be in a better position going forward? Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. My apologies. So we're going to consider Azure, but why? Why are we considering the usage of Azure as a DR mechanism to this? Well, within Azure itself, the disaster recovery and the backup solutions are built into that environment, into that platform at the first party level. So it's not like it's a third party component or mechanism that we need to install on top of something. It's integrated, interwoven into the fabric of the Azure environment itself. And so Azure supports protecting environments that are not just Microsoft based. Again, we know environments have multiple different types of systems. So it supports VMware, Linux, and physical systems. It works in an end-to-end kind of capacity there. It makes it easy to start implementing a hybrid strategy, because if we want to do that extension from our own personal data center into Azure, we can leverage the solution and the technology as a replication tool to protect our workloads in Azure in case of a DR scenario. And the solution even works well as a migration tool, which we'll cover in a little bit later. But through this, if we do this extension, this hybrid strategy, or use it as a migration mechanism into Azure itself, well, now that our solutions can tap into the Azure world, we can now avail ourselves of the other solutions and services built into Azure that we may not have been able to leverage before. We can think about big things like machine learning and analytics and intelligence stuff that can really give us more insight in our data. It can also enhance our services that we provide through our solutions to our customers, giving us the competitive edge. And so really, business continuity and our plan around that needs to include both disaster recovery and backup. It's a better together story. Our disaster recovery can be used for application failures and use that mechanism to fail over into Azure so that our mission critical systems, our business critical workloads are always up and operational, regardless of what may be happening in our environment. And on the backup side, leveraging that technology together allows us to do restores against corrupt or lost data. So we have a flexibility between the new solution recovery services in Azure that ties these two pieces together. It combines both components into the same service and makes it easier to have a full and complete disaster recovery solution for our environment. So with this, with the recovery services solution, we can leverage it to protect and extend our data center. With the Azure Site Recovery, ASR for short, it can be used to protect our critical applications, but then, like we mentioned, it can be used as a migration tool. So perhaps you're just starting into the Azure world and you're looking at seeing what can work for you. Maybe you want to lift and shift some of your systems into Azure to see how they perform as a migration option. So the Azure Site Recovery tool empowers you to do this replication, this lift and shift from one site into Azure and do a one-way failover, in effect, to migrate it into Azure as is, instead of needing to deploy brand new Azure virtual machines and reinstall and reconfigure the solutions. But with Azure Backup, we can use that as a backup location for anything we have in our own data centers, and copying that data into the cloud in a backup vault, effectively replacing our need for tape storage. So even if we're using any Azure IaaS, so infrastructure as a service virtual machines, deployed directly into Azure, we can even directly and easily back those solutions up directly in Azure as well into the same backup vault. So with Azure Site Recovery, it really is a complete disaster recovery solution. Not only does it support these multi-types of environments, Hyper-V, VMware, and physical infrastructure. It supports Windows and a lot of Linux OSs that continues to be added to and grown. But in fact, it even works with other cloud providers like AWS. So maybe you have some stuff that's running in Google Cloud or AWS. You can actually protect those systems in Azure Site Recovery, or use Azure Site Recovery to migrate a workload running in AWS to Azure. So it's not still just directly tied around Azure itself or your own data center. Other cloud providers can be protected as well as a DR failover or migration scenario. ASR also supports site-to-site. So if you actually have two data centers, Site A and Site B, it helps to orchestrate and, here's the key, automate the replication and failover between those two sites. So we see in the diagram here physical VMware, of course, even VMM as a virtual machine and Hyper-V host management tool. On the System Center side, it can help manage the two components between each side of those two sites and help orchestrate and automate key actions around that protection. So it's not just going from your site or another cloud provider into Azure only. It works in many different scenarios for that effect. There we go. So when we replicate and migrate workloads, the solution, again, like we talked about, helps extend our data center, but it's also on demand. So it empowers you to automate and trigger that failover. So you can even use the solution for testing and migration. So we see in the diagrams here, we have virtual machines, physical, Windows, Linux, stuff we've already talked about, replicating into Azure, but we also see other heavy hitters or heavy lifts like SQL Server or Oracle. Even SAP systems can be protected and or migrated from one location into Azure as well. So it's not just small workloads like just little web servers or things of that nature, but it can handle large process-intensive systems like SQL, like database systems, and things of that nature. So it's not limited in scope against what types of endpoints or systems it can protect. So we have multiple scenarios that are covered through one simple solution. With ASR, we get things like that automated replication, like we talked about, RPO and RTO, so recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So how often is data replicated from our on-prem data center into Azure? So down to a matter of minutes. And how many recovery points in time do we want to fail back to? So if you want to say take a snapshot once an hour and retain that for 24 hours so that you can roll back If there's some corruption or some malware or something that affects the system, you can flip back and do a recovery, not to just the latest point, which might have been affected by some negative thing like that, but a further back point in time. We get this planned and unplanned failover with our recovery plans that we build. And this is actually really powerful because you can test your DR playbook like we mentioned, but so that you can be confident that the solution works before you actually have a disaster happen. So in the solution, in the tool, there's a test failover mechanism you can use that will bring up a virtual machine in Azure and attach the replicated disks and data, so you can go and yourself or your devs or your end users go and test it and confirm, yes, my application is up and running, it's responding the way it's expected to, so you have confidence that your DR solution or scenario is operating as expected, and you can run through that, like we said, every quarter, every 6 months, annually, however often you want, as far as your DR scenario playbook dictates or requires. It also has the power to do a failback support. So let's say your data center has a disaster, and so you migrate or flip the switch to bring up your replicated system in Azure so that your business is still operational, and then dealing with whatever issue occurred, you want to then fail that back to your on-premises data center. Well, that's supported not only in Hyper-V but VMware and physical systems. So again, it works across different scenarios, different supported workloads on many different aspects there. What's really nice also is this create on demand test copies in Azure. A lot of organizations will use this solution not only as a backup DR scenario to confirm and make sure you're ready in a DR situation, but using it to make a copy of your production environment. And why would that be important? Well, a lot of organizations use it to test against patching or new versions of app code. So how many times, if you deploy Windows patches out into the environment, if you're not sure that it's going to break a business critical system, not every organization has a UAT QA domain that's completely mirrored as it is in production to test against. So there's some risk there. With this ASR solution, it's literally a copy of what's running in production because that's what you're protecting. And then you can spin up that test VM in Azure, apply the patches, apply the new code, and then be confident in rolling out those patches or those changes in your production environment because you've effectively tested it already against production. So what's supported in this type of solution? Well, Microsoft has tested many different scenarios and applications, and they continue to enhance and add to the solution. So we see things that are native, of course, to Microsoft, where the supporting team has verified that, and also other third-party stuff like Linux and SAP and Oracle that they've specifically tested against as well. And we also see some stuff is still in progress. So it's an ever evolving, ever enhanced solution that continues to be refined and added to on a continual cloud cadence basis. So now we're going to talk briefly about Azure Backup. So whether we're using an on-premises environment, maybe we have a hybrid environment in place, or we're actually using Azure IaaS machines, regardless of those environments, we can use Azure Backup across all those scenarios. So the solution integrates with System Center Data Protection Manager, so DPM for short. It also has its own standalone installation for small, medium business scenarios. And as we mentioned before, if we're running IaaS VMs, we can directly and simply back up those virtual machines running in Azure. So we can do an easy, quick restore. So what do we get out of Azure Backup? Well, we get this long-term retention. Think of it as a replacement for your tape storage. So some industries have specific requirements for data retention, like healthcare, the legal industry, manufacturing. Azure Backup has a retention period of up to 99 years. So if you have to keep backups for 6, 5, 7, even 10 years, how many tapes would that be? And how challenging could it be to retrieve data from that right tape? Calling it back from off-site, finding the right tape in the right set, finding the right file, and so forth. Azure Backup replaces that and simplifies this approach and this need. So, as everything, what does it cost? Things come down to cost. When you compare things like software licensing, regular maintenance on the backup solutions and systems, off-site storage of those tapes and so forth, a cloud-based backup solution can be significantly cheaper. So that's something to consider, to try out and compare how that can save costing on CapEx and OpEx IT budgets. So how does it work? Well, we're going to use this example in this diagram of an Azure virtual machine. So this is an IaaS virtual machine running in Azure, whether it's in a hybrid site-to-site VPN or not, that doesn't specifically matter. But in this example, we have this virtual machine running, and it has this VM agent installed. And through that, we have this backup extension. And that allows Azure, through this Azure Backup service, to take a snapshot of the disks. We see it's not just the OS, it's multiple disks across whatever's running in that virtual machine. In Azure, you can have many different disks attached to a VM, just like we can do in our virtualized and physical environments as well. And it takes that data and stores it securely in the Azure Backup Vault. So just to give an idea of who we are at New Signature and how this plays into what we do. Of course, we're a technology company and we do full service. We're a premier Microsoft solution provider, but our focus is not necessarily on the technology, but on the customer experience. The values that New Signature was founded on continue to drive our success and our commitment to delivering this great customer experiences and how we help transform your business with the different solutions and services that we provide. And we do this through this three-ring model where we can help plan your what projects and what activities you want to do, help you build it out in a supported mechanism, and even help extend that through assistive operation through our managed services, so we can continue to work together in helping your business, where you can focus on the strategic stuff for your organization, and we can make sure the underlying components are always operating properly for you. So from a technology perspective, we deliver a full life cycle of services across the entire Microsoft stack. So whether you're on-prem or in the cloud or in this hybrid model, New Signature is here to help you understand the value and realize the benefits and mitigate any risks that you may have along the way. So with this, New Signature has developed a service that we call Recovery Experience. So we leverage this on top of the ASR technology, and it provides a comprehensive recovery plan, and a team of experts that will help you create and update and maintain the execution of that plan. So in the event when a disaster occurs and a recovery is required, New Signature's highly skilled team of experts are available 24/7 to be able to take that call and assist you in that situation. So we utilize Azure's best services available. ASR is a state-of-the-art technology that Microsoft has developed the solution around so that you can rest easy knowing that your application is protected. It'll be available in any case that any disaster that happens in your data center, that we're here to assist and help in that scenario along the process, along the way. So our services are built on three pillars or offerings around that. We have our professional services, managed services, and cloud applications. So just briefly, our professional services, we have consulting capabilities, which we're able to divide into various practices like platform and productivity, and even custom design and development. With our managed services, this includes our advisory and operational service, where we provide a recurring basis for our customers in reporting and working with your IT teams directly. And our cloud applications are built and packaged as a SaaS offering for you to be able to leverage, and we develop that on top of the Azure Cloud Platform and the productivity tools that Microsoft has available today. So that covers our time together today. We have a few minutes. If there's any questions around either the ASR technology specifically or Azure Backup, or about New Signature in general.
Everyone, you can feel free to unmute, or you can type your questions in the chat box. Alternatively, if you're not comfortable asking any questions here, you can feel free to email us there with info@newsignature.com, or email back to any of the emails I have sent. But we do appreciate your time today. And again, this presentation will be sent within the next couple of days to everyone. And with that, anyone have any questions? Feel free to take yourselves off mute if you would like. Okay, well, with that, we do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day.